shift our focus just a little bit into visibility, which means IP fabric. It gives us actionable information so that we can dramatically improve the security and the stability of our digital services, but at the same time, it speeds transformation and it helps to cut IP costs. So as you just said, I've got Jacob Al-Nasser and Set with me. I always look forward to talking with you every year. I'm so glad that we got the opportunity to sit down together this time instead of stand up as we usually do.
Yep, and it's great to be here again, Steve, and see the energy around the show and especially outside the studio right now.
So much great energy. All right, so let's start with one of the most common challenges that enterprises face today. When it comes to hybrid multi-cloud visibility, what are they up against? What is the issue right now that they need to conquer?
Yeah, I think really it's a combination of factors that kind of scale out from one kind of leading cause and then kind of snowballs from there. The first factor obviously being enterprise networks are immensely complex, and they're spanning multiple locations, on-prem, cloud, various cloud instances spread out globally. So that in and of itself, provides a pretty tough nut to crack in terms of getting visibility across the whole environment. Right. And then when you add to that, the fact that these environments usually aren't homogeneous, they potentially are using different vendors for various reasons. There have been purchases historically or whatever that have kind of built up this kind of mixed environment. Then that adds a second layer. So what you'll effectively end up with then is tooling and information that's coming from various sources, but it's very, very hard to get a single view of that network environment and its state. But that's the foundational information you really need to be able to make decisions as to how to drive and grow that network or operate that network.
What a challenging catch-22, right? We develop complexity within the network. Right. We want simplicity within the network, but the complexity is what allows us to go where we need to go by onboarding those different capabilities. So how is the network digital twin, for example, different than a legacy monitoring tool? Do we have to have both of them to cover the network with that complexity and do it in the cloud?
Yeah, so there's a real difference between them, but they actually work very much hand in hand. So both are really necessary. And I think, in essence, the difference is the network monitoring is effectively showing you what's the state of my network in terms of, is there something going on that I need to be aware of? Alerts, something's not quite right based on a setting, etc. Whereas the network digital twin is effectively, I think the comparison would be, monitoring is almost like measuring someone's pulse.
Okay.
So you're getting that state of what's the pulse doing, but if something happens with the pulse, you don't necessarily know why the pulse is doing what it's doing.
Of course.
Whereas the network digital twin would potentially be like an MRI. You're getting a view of that whole environment, everything that's there, which then enables you to connect the two dots together to establish this is happening and potentially this is the cause of why that would be happening, right? So they don't necessarily work well, they work really well together.
They work really well. One is almost a setup, gives you the big overview, one is the deep dive that we need, right? So when we look at visibility and how it impacts our business, let's talk the cost element. How do we optimize our CapEx on this? How do we know that we're spending intelligently and building out what we actually need as opposed to just throwing dollars and hoping that it gives us the full visibility across the stack that we need?
Yeah, I think it's a big problem, and I think it's a great question because effectively, the changes that happen in the network on a daily basis, whether it's hardware changes, whether it's things being switched in, switched out, expansions, migrations, whatever, it's really a living organism, so to speak, right? So there's a lot of changes that can happen and for whatever reason aren't documented, slip through the cracks, and then suddenly you end up with a place where you're paying for everything, for every powered port, you're paying for every instance of cloud, you're paying for every rack, every switch or every device in each rack. And if you're looking at this at scale and you're talking thousands of devices, then having phantom devices or devices that aren't leveraged, aren't properly managed, you're not aware that they're there, or they've gone through end of life, or various other factors, those are all costs that add up, so fairly significant numbers really quickly. So it's almost one of those things of, it seems like a fairly basic problem, but if you can get it right and solve it as much as possible, you can kind of really optimize both CapEx, but also OpEx, right? Because you've got the operating cost to actually run all of that hardware and those services on there as well, and they're potentially not being leveraged. So it's a case of figuring out how to right-size everything to really meet the requirements of what you have at that moment.
All right, so let me tug at that thread a little bit. Why Cisco? What do we do that is unique to make sure that we keep those costs in check and so people know where that potential wasteful spend is taking place?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that, with Cisco, it's the tooling that kind of works across the hardware and works across all the devices, right? So Cisco tooling itself provides a really great view of what you've got running in there, right? And I think it's that access to the information, to have it to hand and have it in a clear manner that makes it actionable, that's really the best approach.
That's why Cisco is such a strong partnership, right?
Exactly.
All right, so nearly half of all large IT projects today are over budget.
Yeah.
They're off schedule. Does network visibility change that paradigm? Can it help to get a project on track and keep a project on track?
I think it most certainly can. But I think it starts even from the beginning. I think every network project is based around an assumption of, this is what I believe I have, and this is the change or what I'd like to build on top, whether it's a migration, whether it's expansion, whatever. So just having the foundational information of what do I actually have, what is in my network, what is the state of my network, where is, what does it look like, that's the first step you need to even to build on top of it. So really just having that initial data set is what enables you to start that project. If you have projects starting without that data set, and it's based on, let's say, documentation that may be out of date or inaccurate, you're starting to build something where you're going to have errors creeping in fairly quickly. Yeah. And then bringing that back into check, that requires a lot of work in terms of like trying to figure out where did this occur, because we didn't have a starting point, right? So, with IP Fabric, it really is a case of, it's not only the foundational information at the beginning, but because you can then run the same scans and the same checks later on, it does let you then, for example, step back from any errors or drift that may have occurred, right? Because you can compare what happened and try and figure out, okay, why is this not exactly the way I envisioned it when I was kind of coming up with it?
Interesting. Here's an interesting thing. We're about to, let's say I'm about to kick off a big digital transformation, right? I've got the project lined up. I've got a time frame in front of me with my team. I've developed it with leadership. What do I actually need to know before I get underway? Is the visibility story the primary story, or is the baseline, the initial baseline, the primary story? Where do I begin?
Right. Yeah. I think it's really the initial baseline, right? But they're very much they're interlinked, because the visibility is effectively built on the baseline of, here is what we have, and then when you have what you have, then you can build the model on top of it, understanding what's actually in that environment, right? So the first step is getting that baseline of what's here. That then gives you the model on top of it of what that network actually looks like at a multi-layer view. And then from there, you can start stepping forward into the other areas of, okay, what do I need to expand, or what do I need to change to get the result I intend?
What about the security side? How do I know that I feel safe? Meaning, how can I put myself out there to leadership to say, now this is the right thing to do. We know exactly what to move forward with. Is it a Cisco play that basically says you're safe with making this investment and taking it from the baseline to the next level?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of tooling, right? I think today it's one of these things where with these complex environments, it's usually you need to find an ecosystem of tools that work really well together, which again reflects the partnership with Cisco, where they work really well together to deliver the result that's in many cases can be unique or specific for that enterprise client. So from the security side, this is one of Cisco's great strengths. Mm-hmm. From our side, a lot of the security element is based around you can't control and you can't manage what you can't see. Okay, so we give that kind of baseline visibility of the devices, but then obviously Cisco's got actually the firewalls and security management, the zoning or everything else that's related to that delivers the actual implementation of that security infrastructure.
All right, fantastic. I'm going to end by putting a big pressure on you here. So you've got 30 seconds to go after this. How do I get the buy-in, right? So I want to go the IP Fabric route. I know that I want to make the investment. How do I actually get that buy-in?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. So I think where we have one of our unique selling points is really time to value. We are very quick to deploy, very easy to deploy. So usually when we have a customer that's with us at a demo, they can see the value fairly quickly. And being able to show that value quickly to a potential customer enables them to show that value further upstream as well, right? And because we provide such foundational information, usually that foundational information is required for network projects that are budgeted initiatives, that are things that these enterprises are trying to deliver and grow. So then that gives you that path to say, look, you've got this amazing project that you know is going to deliver immense value to your company or your enterprise. You need this foundational information to make sure that project is successful. Then that gives you a quick path to basically understanding and value.
And that is why IP Fabric is such a great story. Jacob, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. I look forward to this every year. Thank you so much for the time and the great insight into everything that you and the IP Fabric team are doing.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.